Gator Nation, we welcome you to another Saturday inside the swamp. The Gators 1-1 will host the South Florida Bulls, also 1-1 on the season, and obviously we hope the outcome a little bit better than what happened last week, but that will be up to you. Make sure you're loud, you're rowdy as we get going and get you ready for game start at 7:30. It is our First and 10 show presented by Wells Fargo. I am Jeff Cardozo, and there are so many different storylines to talk about. Obviously, some of the things that happened last week, Billy Napier has worked really hard to correct this week, and we should see those results on the field. Really looking forward to that and really looking forward to getting going. So let's get started with this month's Man of the Month. It is Jeremy Crawshaw, and he kind of talks with a little bit of an accent because he is Australian. Well, guess what? The punter on the other side is also Australian for South Florida today, so it should be a fun one, but always fun catching up with Jeremy Crawshaw, who is this month's Man of the Month.
Jeremy Crawshaw, punter.
Yeah, I think Crawshaw's role is unique. I think he's a specialist, but he's a guy that's well respected. He has character. He's got some personality. He's a vocal guy. He brings energy to the team. Well respected, intelligent, has discipline, handles his business, and provides a great example to his teammates.
I'd probably describe my leadership style as somebody who leads by example, but also through love as well. Someone who shows to the guys that I'm all for them and that my leadership style is to only improve them. I want to bring everybody up and, to the best that they can be.
Jeremy's attitude is infectious, man. The guy's confident. I think he works extremely hard, and I think that rubs off on the team. That level of confidence in the way he prepares, and he takes his role seriously, right? And he's a loyal guy that wants to do his job for the team.
Well, there you go, mates. Jeremy Crawshaw talks a little bit Australian. Now we've got another guy that probably talks a little bit different as well. He is from Louisiana, actually followed Billy Napier here from Louisiana, and he is a big part of the offensive line. He has pushed a lot of people around and gotten a lot of preseason accolades as well, up to first team All-American honors, and that is Osiris Torrence. This is a guy that you don't really see much because he is doing his work up on the line there, pushing those people around. So we'll learn a little bit more about Osiris right now as we've mic'd him up.
Boy, see the coach. Two.
Tell that to the mic. Tell that to the mic, baby.
Appreciate it, bro.
Here
Help
we go,
me,
Sabo.
give me motivation.
That's it. Ow.
1, 2, 1, 2. Can you keep your feet moving? Keep your feet moving. Yeah. Some Gatorade. Appreciate it. Orange. He's good.
Always love those mic'd up segments, and gosh, we loved what the offensive line did last year against South Florida. Heck, we love what everything the Gators did. Last year, the Gators totaled 666 yards of offense, over 300 running, and over 300 passing, so hopefully that kind of day happens again. This is our First and 10 show. It is brought to you by Wells Fargo, and we want to know where you are watching from right now. I know there's a lot of people out tailgating right now, getting ready to be there inside the swamp, but if you're not here, tell us right now on the screen, hey, I'm listening from, maybe it's Australia because you're Jeremy Crawshaw's parents, or maybe you're up in Seattle, Washington. Wherever you are, let us know. And that's what it is all about, because we are now going to start to break this thing down. Again, I mentioned some of the stats. Gators absolutely dominated South Florida last year. This is actually just the third time that these schools have ever met each other. Second time inside the swamp. And we now have our little breakdown with Kyle Crooks, Sean Kelley, and Scott Carter.
Now joined by the voice of the Gators, Sean Kelley, senior writer of FloridaGators.com. Scott Carter getting you ready for Florida and South Florida from the swamp. Another home game for the Gators. And Sean, we'll start with you. A little bit of a different conversation this week around Florida, of course, coming off an SEC opening loss to Kentucky. But when you look at the performance of Florida, what comes to mind? Some of the good, some of the bad.
Yeah, I think that obviously this week has been focused on, just getting better and cleaning up a lot of things that not only were in week 2, but week 1 as well, that have been consistent through the first 2 weeks of the season. On the good side, I really thought the defense took a step forward. I thought that they, by being more disciplined up front, it allowed them to play maybe faster. They seemed more aggressive and put pressure on a quarterback last weekend for the first time this season. So hopefully that'll continue. You'll do it without Ventrell Miller this week. That's a huge loss for the Gator defense. But then offensively, again, this conversation continues about the importance of Anthony Richardson being in rhythm and having a good game. The 14 points directly off of his 2 turnovers, obviously was a major storyline last week. I still think that he's trying to find where his favorite receiver is going to find space on that field. Ricky Pearsall at the moment seems to be a target that's in sync with him and finds ways to kind of get underneath different layers of an opponent defense. And then let's see that Florida run game get back to a little more of the way it was in week 1. But obviously in week 2, there were flashes there, and ETN gets his first career touchdown last week. I think the young man has a brilliant career ahead of him. The more I watch him, the more he reminds me of his brother. I'm not so sure that his brother was as good as Trevor is now at this stage in his career. So in that sense, I think those are still the storylines that kind of I've got my eye on if we're being Florida specific.
And Scott, you look at Anthony Richardson, he really took ownership of his play in the postgame. Being the quarterback at the University of Florida is not an easy thing to be. There's a lot of pressure there. How do you feel like he's dealing with it all after another start against a ranked opponent? It hasn't been easy in his early tenure as a starter.
Yeah, they don't. He gets thrown right into it, man. As a starter, third, 3 ranked teams. So USF's his first team that is not ranked during one of his starts. I think Anthony's handled it well. He handled it really well after the game. That's what you want to see out of your quarterback at the face of the program. You want to see him come out there and take ownership and accountability and say, hey, I didn't play well. I'll let the guys down. Let's go back to work and let's get this thing going again. And, I think that's what Billy Napier's message has been to the team. And I think that's Anthony's taken it to heart. And now, Anthony had a really big game against USF last year down at Tampa. He really showcased his talent. So he just needs to get back out there, have some good things happen, get some confidence back early, and just the whole team really rally around that.
And Sean, you look at South Florida coming in, and don't tell Billy Napier this, but this could be one of those get right games or trap games. And Billy Napier has none of that sort of talk. But South Florida defensively last week in a win over Howard, they gave up over 400 yards of total offense. They've given up about 240 rush yards per game. So you'd have to think, at least looking at the numbers, this is a game where Florida's offense should be very successful.
Yeah, I think that this would be a trap if and only if Florida had started the season 2-0. But coming off the loss to Kentucky this past week, this is more of a get right game. I kind of in some ways feel somewhat sympathetic to USF that the Bulls have the Gators' full attention right now. And there's a real yearning for wanting to, A, maybe take out some frustrations, but B, more importantly, get a lot of things right before they jump back into play in the SEC against Tennessee. Not that they're overlooking USF toward Tennessee, but this is their chance to kind of be tracked in the right way for a road game the following week up in Knoxville. It's interesting with USF in that they've had 2 very different opponents. The expected result against BYU and I guess win-loss wise, the expected result against Howard. But then again, I'm not so sure Jeff Scott is feeling really comfortable with the way that his team played against South Florida last week. They have some positives going their way. I've watched Bohannon a lot. He was at Baylor, and I happened to work a bunch of their games during his tenure there. This is a big game quarterback. This is not going to be a problem for him to come into the Swamp and feel, uncomfortable in any way. Now, has he looked as sharp here in the last 2 weeks as perhaps he did during his prime at Baylor? Not so much. But at the same time, he's just a little bit smaller than Anthony. And much like Anthony, he's a dual threat guy. And South Florida also has, much like Florida, this running back room by committee. And while maybe their lead back hasn't gotten them big chunk plays, I think like 3.9 yards per carry, they've got a guy like Battie and a few others that can break loose as Battie did against Howard last week. So there's one more thing, and Scott, I don't want to take up all this, but the other thing that I think is going to be fun to watch on Saturday night is the fact that South Florida's offensive line is extremely experienced. And so for them to work in an environment like Ben Hill Griffin Stadium and against a Florida defensive line that's still trying to find their own identity, I think that's a good thing for Florida to go up against, and could keep South Florida maybe involved longer than one perhaps would expect.
And Scott, flipping back over to Florida's side of things, but Billy Napier is a guy who's so even keel. You see it in all his press conferences. He's very calm no matter what happens. How do you feel he's refocused this team after facing its first adversity of the year? We're only 2 games in, and you're going to face more of it, but he seems like the perfect guy to calm down a locker room and to focus a locker room to take it week by week.
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature that we've seen since day one, and I think he's been on extra alert there this week. He's wanted his team to be alert, aware of that loss and make it an opportunity. That's been his message. He's told them to be consumed by improvement at practice. There was a lot that didn't go right against Kentucky, and he wants to see that turn around, against USF, because as Sean alluded to earlier, this is a great opportunity for them as they head into the SEC play when it gets really, that long stretch where they're going to have to play well consistently to have a chance. So I think really, if you've been around Billy Napier enough now, or fans have watched him enough, nothing really surprised me with the way he responded this week. I think he went into coach mode, and he's like, okay, we've got some things we got to work on. I've got their attention. Let's make the most of this week, and now we get to see what the result of that message is on Saturday night.
And Sean, I did want to go back to the Gators offensively and the wide receivers, because you had alluded to it, finding that deep down the field threat. Pearsall comes in first year in the program. Justin Shorter is somebody who can really be a big impact receiver for this team. Henderson's had a good first couple games. Do you see a guy really standing out eventually and becoming that go-to number one target in this offense?
Maybe not. I mean, the numbers would tell you right now that Henderson's, getting the most targets, looks, all of it, 12 catches now on the season. Pearsall's come up with that nice comfort zone across the middle. It's usually for double-digit yards. I still think that Ricky's probably the guy that can stretch this a little bit, take the top off, quote unquote, but it'll be tough. I mean, we're talking about the SEC defensive secondaries coming up down the road here for Florida. Justin Shorter's a guy that I can't, again, at practice, even yesterday, he makes a great play in practice. We've seen those flashes. I know that Justin, and I know obviously Anthony and everybody else on that side of the football is waiting for him to put his mark on this offense on a week-to-week basis. And so I'm pulling for him to be that guy. And then maybe, if that happens, that Henderson, Shorter, Pearsall trio can kind of lead the way. And then you sprinkle in Frazier's and some of these other guys. Marcus Burke, I think, is a guy that eventually might be that speed demon you need on the edge. I just, it may be just a little bit early in that process still, but, he's another guy that has some track type speed, and we'll see what happens. But certainly that has to be in play as this team hopes to improve. And again, let's not forget, in a Billy Napier offense, mixing in a tight end on a dependable basis would also be a nice thing in this system.
Well, Sean, have a great call coming up here in the Swamping in South Florida. Scott, we look forward to reading all your work after the game on FloridaGators.com.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, Sean Kelley, Scott Carter, look forward to their work coming up this weekend as we send it back to Jeff.
Well, 3 great guys speaking right there. And speaking of speaking, there's been a lot of great speakers that have come inside the building, the old facility, and now, of course, the new facility, the Heavener Complex. Billy Napier has brought in a whole bunch of people, and that is part of the GatorMade program led by Savannah Bailey. And Savannah has gone over the entire country, found the best of the best to motivate these guys, to give them life lessons, and basically make them understand that when football is over, and hopefully that's a really long time, there's still so much to do with their lives, and that's what these speakers are all about. So First, we'll give you a little feature about what the GatorMade program is all about, and then we'll hear from the head man himself, Billy Napier, as he gets you ready for South Florida.
Hey, I'm Savannah Bailey. I serve as the Senior Director of Player Relations and of GatorMade. GatorMade is your personal and professional development specifically for football scholar athletes, helping them grow into the men that they want to be, providing them excellent opportunities in service, leadership, and just values-based identity formation. And some of that, finding those excellent resources to pour into them, whether it be Shep, Inky Johnson, E.T., a call to men, anybody that you can think of that really is able to provide some of that perspective, some challenges.
Right, the perspective, the energy that we bring to a thing, right, the focus that we bring to a thing, the respect that we bring to a thing. I'm talking about every single day showing up and being consistent with the opportunity and being grateful for the fact that we get to do it. Many are called, few are chosen. And I gotta be honest with you, I think I'm speaking to the chosen few.
Through all of our speakers, it's not just about motivation and juice and high energy. A lot of it's about what are you gonna do to invest in yourself, invest in this program, buy into what we're saying, and really go out and be the best person that you can and the best player that you can.
The opportunities after this are endless, because I promise you this, hard work is not a football term. It's a life term. Whatever it is that you decide to do, once football is over, this should be a segue into what you do the rest of your life.
All right, coming up next, the South Florida Bulls, a non-conference game for the Florida Gators. Kickoff 7:30 at the Swamp. Jeff Scott's team comes in, coach, 1-1. They just came off of a win over Howard. There's a particular quarterback who is also large. Seemingly, we've got these big quarterbacks in front of us each week. Bohannon comes over from Baylor, and now he's the guy for the Bulls. Your thoughts on what you're facing this weekend?
Well, we got a great relationship with Jeff. Obviously, we worked together at Clemson. Also, great relationship with Jerry Bohannon, right? Recruited him when we were at Alabama. So, you know, this is a team that's added probably 15 transfers in the two deep, you know, a wholesale change at a lot of position groups. So I do think they're improving as a team. You see the effort, you see the toughness, the intangibles are there. I think as the quarterback settles in, they'll continue to improve. So there's going to be some great challenges that come with it. We're excited about being back at home again.
Coach, there was a lot of messaging last week about how to handle things after success. What's the messaging like this week with your team coming off of the disappointing loss to Kentucky?
Well, I see opportunity. You know, I think anytime you struggle, you fail, you make mistakes, you have adversity in life, I think that creates opportunity, right? So I think the big thing here is we want to get consumed with improvement. We want to get consumed with our routine, our process, and how we prepare. And there's only one way to get this bad taste out of your mouth, and that's go win a football game.
No doubt. And we'll look for you to be a big participant as well. The crowds have been great so far at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. They've been in there early, and they've certainly played a role for the Gators, who look to go to 2-1 this week when they take on South Florida. For head coach Billy Napier, I'm Sean Kelley. Go Gators.
All right, great stuff there from Savannah Bailey, and of course, Billy Napier getting you ready for Inside the Swamp. And Billy Napier has gotten the guys ready all week long. It has been an absolutely fantastic week of practice, and I think the neatest thing, and we'll hopefully see that here very shortly in the game, Billy Napier has worked very, very hard to correct some of the mistakes. They've looked at a lot of film, and they have certainly tried to figure out what they need to be better at, and we will see that inside the Swamp. Well, that's going to do it for our First and 10 show, presented by Wells Fargo. Lots and lots of festivities, so get yourselves in there early. If you're out tailgating right now, get in there, see the pride of the sunshine, and make sure you're loud again throughout the entire 3 hours or so inside the Swamp. I'm Jeff Cardozo, and that was your First and 10 show, presented by Wells Fargo. Go Gators.